Previously, we've talked about how the XML HTTP request object returns both text and XML versions of the data being requested. Sometimes you'll want to use one and sometimes the other. And in this exercise, we're going to get into why you'd want to use one over the other. If you're following along with the exercise files, this is AJAX/chapter03/05/script.html. And in our HTML file, it's the same as before, except we've added 2 lines here, which is 2 links, one of which will request an XML file as XML, and one of which will request an XML file as text. Our colors.xml file hasn't changed any, so the bulk of the work is being done by script.js. We've changed a few things here from the previous exercise. Now, when the window loads, the initAll function will be called. Here's initAll, and what that does is set on-click handlers for our 2 links. For the first one, we're going to set document.getElementById request text. We're going to set its on-click event handler to be an anonymous function. Because event handlers can only handle a single line, an anonymous function tells JavaScript to just pretend that everything inside it is a single line of code. It's just a block that's a black box being passed off to the event handler. We're going to do 3 things inside this function. We're going to be setting the text request Boolean to be true because they requested the text version. Then we're going to call the makeRequest function. And finally, we're going to return false. We need to end up here with a return false so that JavaScript can tell the browser that the link that the user clicked on has been handled sufficiently by JavaScript. The browser does not actually need to go off to a new page, does not need to reload the current page, anything like that. JavaScript handled it all just fine. Now, the on-click handler for document.getElementById request XML looks very similar. The only actual difference is that now we're setting text request to be false because if we made it here, we don't want a text request, we want an XML request. Again, we call makeRequest and we return false. So that's initAll. The makeRequest function is identical to that in the previous example. All our remaining changes are going to be down in function show contents. We're still checking to see if ready state is 4, because as always that means that we sent off a request to the server and it came back completed. Our status is 200 because it was a good request. Now we're going to set outMessage. And this is a shorthand if-else statement. If you're not familiar with this, you might want to take a good look at it. All it's saying is if text request, then set outMessage to be xhr.responseText, else set outMessage to be xhr.responseXML. In either case, we're just setting the outMessage variable, but if text request is true, we do whatever is between the question mark and the colon. If text request is false, we set outMessage to be whatever is after the colon up to the semicolon. So it's either response text or response XML, based on which link the user clicked on. Our else statement is the same as previously, tells us what the error is. And finally, we set up update area inner HTML to be whatever our out message is. So let's actually see how it works. I'm going to go back to my script.html file, launch it in the browser, and we see our 2 links here. But instead of just running it here, I'm going to go run it inside the DOM inspector, because that lets me get a better look as to what's going on. I click on Inspect, and this way I can see precisely what's happening. So when I click Request an XML file as XML, we get an object XML document here. And when I look at what's contained in the HTML, I can see there's a div, and there's some text, and it's just an object XML document. If I look at the actual JavaScript object, it's just text of, again, type object XML document. But the interesting thing is it has no child nodes. It is just this text here and nothing else. However, if we request an XML file as text, if we're looking at the text content versus the XML content, it's quite different. We go back up here, and we take a look at the div, And instead of text, there's now something called colors. We open it, and there's a whole lot of colors there. Now if we take a look at this div as the JavaScript object, you'll see its child nodes has 3. Some text, an HTML unknown element, and more text. If we open up the unknown one, we see that it's called colors, and we see that there are 55 different nodes here. So you can see there's colors, each of which has a name and a value. And they're both text. There's one value and one name. And we can go back to the DOM node viewer, and we can see here's a color, the name, and its value is aqua. Here's value, and it's set to 00FFFF. Because this is in this kind of format, div, colors, color, name, text, value, and text, we can use getElementByTagName and getElementByID to take a look at this, because these are now objects on our page. They've become nodes in the DOM tree. So even though requesting an XML file as XML might seem like what you want to be doing most of the time, you're actually going to find throughout these exercises that we almost always request an XML file as text, because we want to then be able to access the content of the request via the DOM. This way we can read it in, manipulate it, add to it, change it, display part of it, display all of it. Whatever it is we want to do, we can manipulate it via JavaScript and the DOM. Next up, we're going to talk about XML HTTP request and its security limitations, and why you can't do quite everything you want to do, but you can still do quite a bit.